Nobody expected a man who had spent the night saving lives to be treated like a criminal in the golden light of morning. Nobody expected that the simple act of walking home from a hospital would turn into a tragedy watched by dozens of strangers who could not unsee what they saw. Dr. Elias Carter left St. Mary's Medical Center at 7:02 a.m., still in his scrubs beneath the white coat. His hands smelled faintly of antiseptic. His body begged for rest, but his spirit carried that fragile glow that only comes from knowing you might have saved someone's tomorrow. He had just held the hand of a 12-year-old boy who'd survived a car accident, had just told the boy's mother her son would live. That was the light inside Elias as he pushed open the hospital doors and stepped into the dawn. The golden sun spilled over the parking lot, painting his tired face with warmth. But shadows moved quickly, darker than the sunlight could chase away. Officers Daniels and Kincaid, white men with too much swagger in their stride, had been circling the block like vultures looking for a reason. They spotted him the way predators spot prey. "Hey," Daniels barked, his hand already on the taser. Elias stopped, confused. He looked around. There was no one else. "You talking to me?" Elias asked, voice calm, though a ripple of unease touched his chest. Kincaid sneered. "Don't get smart. Show us some ID. What are you doing here?" Elias blinked. He was still holding his hospital badge, clipped to his pocket. The irony was too cruel. "I work here," he said, pointing to the badge. "I'm a doctor." But they didn't look at the badge. They didn't see the man who had just saved a child's life. They saw only skin. Daniel stepped closer, eyes narrowed, as though the truth Elias spoke was an insult. "We had reports of suspicious activity. You fit the description." Elias's lips parted. He wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but felt only dread. "The description," he repeated softly, "is just black, isn't it?" Kincaid smirked like a man proud of the world's ugliest joke. "Keep your mouth shut." The bystanders' nurses heading home, patients stepping outside for fresh air, a janitor sweeping the curb slowed down, sensing the storm. One of them whispered, "That's Dr. Carter." Another pulled out a phone. Elias raised both hands slowly, palms open. "Officers, I just finished a 12-hour shift. I'm not a threat to anyone." But Danielle's finger tightened. The crackle of electricity filled the air, cruel and unnatural against the soft morning. Then it struck. The taser dart hit Elias square in the chest. His body convulsed, arms jerking, legs buckling. The white coat, symbol of his life's work, crumpled with him to the concrete. His scream was short, strangled by the electricity coursing through him. Gasps broke out from the small crowd. A nurse dropped her coffee. Someone shouted, "Stop! He's a doctor." But the officers were deaf to it. Kincaid kicked the badge lying on the ground as if proof of innocence was trash. Daniels pressed the trigger again. Elias's body writhed, then collapsed into stillness. 7 minutes. That's how long it would take for the city's Special Response Task Force to react. 7 minutes between the first scream and the thunder of armored boots descending upon the precinct that sheltered Daniels and Kincaid. But in those 7 minutes, a truth had already spread. The phones recorded it, the internet carried it, and the world watched. Dr. Elias Carter lay on the pavement, chest heaving, vision fractured by pain. He could hear the voices, the outrage, the cries of strangers defending him when his body couldn't. He thought of the boy he had saved hours earlier. He thought of the mother's tears of gratitude. And he thought, "This is what my life is worth to them." He tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped. The crowd surged closer. One young woman knelt beside him, shielding him with her arms as if her small frame could stop the violence. "You're okay, doctor, stay with us," she whispered, though her own tears betrayed doubt. Daniels barked, "Step back. This man's resisting arrest." The lie was so grotesque it drew a roar of fury from the witnesses. Phones were everywhere now, capturing every angle, every second. Elias's gaze drifted upward. The sky was so painfully bright, the golden light spilling like fire across glass and steel. He wanted to hold on to it, wanted to believe that light meant something, that it could cleanse the hatred poisoning this street. And then, faintly, through the ringing in his ears, came the sound of engines. Sirens. A different kind of thunder. The task force was coming. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising. "They're here. They're actually coming." Daniels turned, unease flickering across his face. Kincaid's bravado faltered. Because even in their arrogance, They knew what had been done in the open, under the golden morning sun, could not be hidden anymore. The rumble grew louder, engines snarling down the boulevard like a storm rolling in. The task force convoy appeared, black armored vehicles gleaming under the golden sun. Their arrival was a statement. The city was watching, and the city was no longer silent. Daniels froze, Taser still clutched in his hand, while Kincaid's lips trembled as he tried to shape words he couldn't find. The crowd parted, not out of fear, but to make space for the truth that was about to land heavy on this street. The first vehicle screeched to a halt, and out poured officers in dark tactical gear, visors down, weapons slung tight against their chests. But unlike Daniels and Kincaid, they carried more than weapons. They carried the weight of accountability, summoned by a chain of calls, demands, and outrage that reached City Hall before Elias Carter's body had even stopped shaking. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "Stand down. Officers, stand down immediately." The crowd erupted in cheers. Anger and relief tangled together. Phones shot higher into the air, live streams broadcasting every heartbeat. The world was no longer a distant viewer, it was right there, pressing against the scene with millions of invisible eyes. Elias tried to lift his head. His vision was a blur of boots, armor, sunlight. The golden rays hurt his eyes, but he clung to them, because the light was the only thing that didn't twist. His chest burned with the memory of electricity, his limbs weak, but inside him something stirred a stubborn flame that said, "Not yet. Not like this." Daniels finally spoke, shouting over the noise. "This is our jurisdiction." He resisted. "We had to neutralize." His words cracked, brittle as glass. The task force commander, a tall black woman named Captain Rivera, stepped forward. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "I saw the footage before I got here. You had no cause. Drop the taser." Silence hung in the air for a fraction of a second, heavy and suffocating. Daniels' hand twitched. The taser clattered to the ground. Kincaid muttered something under his breath, but no one cared. The crowd surged closer, chanting now, the rhythm of justice rising. "Say his name. Dr. Carter. Say his name." Elias closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. It was louder than the taser, louder than the pain, louder than the years of quiet humiliations he had endured. They were calling his name not because he was broken, but because he mattered. Rivera gestured, and two medics rushed forward from the task force line. They knelt beside Elias, gentle hands checking his pulse, his breathing, his wounds. "You're safe now, doctor," one of them said, though his voice wavered with the weight of the lie. Because safety was fragile here. Safety had already been stolen. The golden light shifted, angling sharper as the sun climbed higher, painting the scene with a brilliance almost cruel in its beauty. It was as if the universe had chosen this hour, this minute, to force everyone to look without flinching. Daniels and Kincaid were pulled back, handcuffs snapping around their wrists. The crowd roared in approval, though some shouted it wasn't enough, that justice demanded more than arrests. The task force formed a wall between the crowd and the disgraced officers, tension crackling like a live wire. Rivera turned to the medics. "Get him to an ambulance now." Elias shook his head weakly. His voice was ragged but clear enough to carry. "No, not yet." Rivera knelt beside him, eyes sharp with both command and compassion. "Doctor, you need care. You've been through," he cut her off with a whisper that still burned. "They need to hear me." The crowd hushed, sensing the shift. The medics hesitated, and Rivera nodded once, giving space. She stood, raising her voice. "Clear the way. Dr. Carter has something to say." Phones steadied, hearts held still. Elias forced himself to sit up, each breath a war against his body. His hands trembled, but his eyes dark, defiant, alive, locked on the crowd, the task force, the world. "I saved a boy's life last night," he began, his voice carrying across the silence. 12 years old. His heart stopped on the table, but I brought him back. His mother held me and cried because her son would live. He paused, the memory flickering like light in his eyes. "And hours later, I walk outside and I'm treated like a threat, like a criminal, like my skin is a weapon." The crowd growled, voices rising in anger. Elias lifted his hand, silencing them. "Do you know what hurts more than electricity ripping through your chest? It's realizing that the life you saved could grow up to face the same taser, the same suspicion, the same hate. What good is saving lives if the world refuses to value them? Tears ran down faces in the crowd. Even some of the task force officers lowered their eyes, as if the weight of his words pressed against their armor. Elias's body shook, but his voice grew stronger. I am not a suspect. I am not a threat. I am a doctor. I am a man. And I will not be silent while they strip that from me. The chant returned, thunderous now, a tidal wave. Dr. Carter, Dr. Carter. Rivera stood at his side, her jaw clenched with pride and fury. She raised her fist high, and the task force mirrored her. It was not just a gesture of solidarity, it was a promise. Daniels and Kincaid shouted something from behind the line, but their words were drowned, swallowed by the chant that carried Elias's name like a weapon of truth. The medics finally lifted him onto a stretcher, the crowd parting like a sea. Phones followed every step, and as the ambulance doors closed, the chant didn't fade. It grew, echoing through streets, ricocheting off buildings, flooding the city. 7 minutes had passed since the taser struck. 7 minutes, and the world had shifted. Inside the ambulance, Elias lay back, eyes closed, chest still aching. But beneath the pain was a certainty that steadied him. He wasn't alone anymore. His voice had broken through. His name was out there, louder than their hate. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the gold of the morning, he believed change had just begun. News traveled faster than the ambulance carrying Dr. Elias Carter. By the time he was admitted for observation, his name had already become a rallying cry flashing across television screens, phone notifications, and digital headlines. The footage of his body convulsing under the taser replayed on a loop, accompanied by words that seared into the conscience of the nation. Doctor, not suspect. On the hospital lawn, hundreds gathered within hours. By sunset, the hundreds had swelled into thousands. Candles flickered in the dusk, their flames trembling in the evening breeze. Faces of every shade stood shoulder to shoulder: students, nurses, veterans, teachers, mothers holding their children high so they could witness what it meant to demand justice. The golden glow of daylight was gone, replaced by a sea of light carried in fragile hands. Inside his hospital room, Elias could hear it. The chants rolled through the walls like distant thunder. He lay propped against a pillow, for running into his arm, body still sore from the assault. Yet each cheer, each call of his name, stitched something inside him back together. Rivera stood at his bedside. The captain had refused to leave his side since the incident, a sentinel of both duty and conscience. They're not going away, she said, her voice low but edged with fire. This city is awake, and it's not going back to sleep. Elias turned his head, meeting her gaze. I didn't want to be a symbol, he whispered. I just wanted to heal people. You still are, Rivera replied. But now healing means more than medicine. It means truth. It means justice. Down the corridor, journalists begged for statements, microphones raised like spears. Hospital staff held the line, shielding their colleague from the frenzy. Yet no barrier could stop the tide outside. At City Hall, the mayor convened an emergency meeting. The footage had gone viral, millions of views, millions of voices demanding action. Protesters filled the steps, their chants rising up to the marble columns like a verdict waiting to be passed. Justice for Dr. Carter, they cried. End racist policing. Inside the chamber, the mayor's advisors bickered. We need to calm the public, one said. Issue a statement about community trust. Another snapped. Trust won't cut it. Those officers have to be charged. The world is watching. The mayor rubbed his temples. He had built a career balancing on tightropes, but this storm offered no middle ground. Prepare the charges, he said finally. Both of them. Excessive force, civil rights violations. We cannot let this city burn. But the city was already burning, not in flames, but in fury. Neighborhoods that had long carried the weight of silent discrimination found their voice. In schools, teachers abandoned lesson plans to let students discuss what had happened. In churches, pastors thundered from pulpits about dignity and the sin of prejudice. In diners and subways, strangers argued and cried and held each other because no one could pretend anymore. The next day, Elias insisted on speaking. Against medical advice, he asked Rivera to help him to the hospital steps. Word spread fast, and when he appeared fragile, leaning on a cane, but upright the crowd erupted in a roar that shook the ground. Cameras flashed, live streams surged, and the chants fell silent as he raised his hand. His voice was hoarse, but it carried with a gravity no amplifier could rival. "You saw what happened to me," Elias began, the weight of truth anchoring each word. "But I am only one man. This isn't about me alone. It's about every black man and woman who walks the streets of this city with the fear of being seen as less, of being treated as a threat before being seen as a neighbor." The crowd murmured, affirmations rolling like waves. Elias drew a breath and went on. "I can heal a broken body. I can stitch a wound, restart a heart. But I cannot heal a society that refuses to see us as human. That healing, that change belongs to all of you." A cheer surged, raw and unstoppable. Elias steadied himself, his hand gripping the cane tighter. "I don't want revenge. I want recognition. I want accountability. I want a world where my nephew can walk home at night without rehearsing how to survive an encounter with the police. I want a world where my patients live not just because I kept them alive in surgery, but because society values their lives when they leave my care." Tears streamed openly through the crowd. Rivera stood behind him, her expression unreadable but her eyes glistening with something fierce. Elias's voice cracked on the final words. "This is not just my fight. It's ours. And we cannot stop not until justice isn't the exception but the rule." The explosion of sound that followed was deafening. Chants, sobs, applause. It was as if the city's soul had cracked open and poured itself into the streets. That night, the protests spread beyond the hospital. Downtown streets filled with marchers. Bridges overflowed with bodies moving as one. Helicopters hovered, their spotlights unable to dim the glow of thousands of cell phone flashlights raised in unity. The golden light of morning had been replaced by a human constellation demanding to be seen. Across the nation, the story ignited. Major networks replayed the footage with headlines of outrage. Commentators debated the depth of systemic racism, some with conviction, others with denial. But denial looked thinner by the hour, collapsing under the sheer weight of evidence and voices refusing to be silenced. Daniels and Kincaid sat in separate holding cells, the chants outside rattling the walls of their isolation. Daniels's arrogance had cracked into bitterness, while Kincaid shook, muttering that they didn't mean for it to go that far. But the walls had no ears for excuses. The world had already judged them. At dawn, Elias lay awake, exhaustion weighing heavy, but his spirit restless. The chants had quieted overnight, but he knew they would return with the sun. He stared at the ceiling and thought of the boy he had saved, the boy whose name was Tyler. Somewhere out there, Tyler was alive because of him. Would Tyler grow up in a world that had learned from this moment? Or would he face the same electric fear Elias had endured? Rivera entered quietly. "They're calling for you to testify," she said. "The trial will move fast. The DA wants to make an example." Elias nodded slowly. "I'll be there." She studied him for a long moment. "Are you ready for what that means? They'll dig into your life. They'll try to twist everything you've done." Elias's gaze hardened. "They already tried to twist who I am with a taser. I survived that. I can survive the truth." Rivera smiled faintly, the first real smile he had seen on her. "Then maybe this city has a chance." Outside, the golden sun rose again, spilling across rooftops and glass towers. It bathed the streets where candles had burned all night, where footsteps had marched, where voices had soared. The light was relentless, refusing to let the darkness hide. And for the first time, Elias believed it might stay. The courthouse steps were a battlefield before the trial even began. Protesters lined the sidewalks in endless rows, signs lifted high. "Justice for Dr. Carter. End systemic racism. Doctors save lives. Cops should too." On the other side, a smaller cluster gathered, waving flags and shouting in defense of the officers. Their voices cracked under the weight of numbers, swallowed by the roar of the majority. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Every camera in the nation seemed to point at that single courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens barely keeping pace with the storm of history unfolding. The wooden benches overflowed activists, doctors in white coats, clergy, students, parents holding pictures of their lost sons and daughters. They came not just for Elias, but for themselves, for every name never shouted loud enough to reach the world. Dr. Elias Carter sat at the witness table, posture straight despite the lingering pain in his chest. He wore no scrubs, no hospital badge, just a simple dark suit, as if to say he was not appearing today as a doctor, but as a man. Rivera sat behind him in uniform, a silent pillar of strength. When the judge entered, silence fell like a heavy curtain. The trial of Officers Daniels and Kincaid began. The prosecution wasted no time. They played the footage again and again, from every angle captured by phones. The jury flinched as Elias's body convulsed, as his scream cut through the speakers. The image of the white coat crumpled on concrete burned into every eye. The prosecutor's voice thundered, a healer, not a threat. A man, not a suspect, and yet treated as if his existence was a crime. The defense countered with familiar lines. Split-second decisions, they argued. Our officers feared for their safety. But the words fell flat against the evidence, against the roar of public outrage outside the courthouse walls. Then Elias took the stand. He walked slowly, cane tapping against the floor, each step echoing in the silent chamber. The oath was read, and he raised his hand, the same hand that had steadied countless patients on operating tables. The prosecutor asked him to recount the morning. Elias did not dramatize, did not embellish. His voice was calm, steady, cutting sharper than any anger could. He described saving Tyler's life hours before, described stepping into the golden light of dawn, described hearing Daniels's barked command. He described the pain, the electricity ripping through his body, the helplessness, the weight of realizing that no matter what he had achieved, his skin was still seen as a threat. Dr. Carter, the prosecutor asked softly, what went through your mind in that moment? Elias swallowed, his eyes fixed on the jury. That I might die with no one remembering I was a doctor, a father, a man. That I would become just another statistic. And I thought, if that's all they see me as, then everything I've worked for meant nothing. A hush consumed the room. Even the judge's gavel could not have broken it. The defense attorney rose, trying to pierce the spell. Dr. Carter, isn't it true that officers had the right to detain you if they suspected what? Elias interrupted, his voice cracking like thunder. That I was black in the wrong place. The wrong place was outside the hospital where I had just saved a child's life. What suspicion justifies erasing my humanity? The attorney faltered, papers trembling in his hand. No further questions. Outside, the crowd erupted as words spread of Elias's testimony. Chants shook the courthouse walls. Days stretched into weeks. Witnesses testified, nurses, bystanders, experts. The evidence piled high, the weight of it pressing down on the defense until their arguments collapsed. Daniels glared through it all, his face twisted in resentment. Kincaid shrank, shoulders hunched, eyes darting as if searching for an escape. At last, the jury withdrew. Hours ticked by, each minute another eternity. Elias sat with Rivera and his supporters, the chants outside a steady drumbeat. He closed his eyes and thought again of Tyler, of the boy's fragile heart beating strong because of his hands. He thought of all the names he had read, the lives stolen before they could grow. He whispered a silent promise to them. This fight is for you too. When the jury returned, the room braced. The foreman rose, voice steady. We, the jury, find the defendants guilty. The words cracked the air like lightning. The room exploded, cheers, sobs, applause breaking through even the judge's gavel. Outside, the crowd erupted, the sound cascading across the city like a tidal wave. Daniels's face drained of color, his bravado shattered. Kincaid slumped, head in his hands. The gavel struck again, but nothing could restrain the moment. Justice, so often delayed, had arrived with the force of inevitability. Elias sat still, tears sliding silently down his face. Rivera placed a hand on his shoulder. You did it, she whispered. He shook his head slowly. No, we did. The days that followed were unlike any the city had ever seen. Streets filled not with riots, but with marches of triumph. Doctors walked in their coats alongside teachers and construction workers. Children carried candles and flowers to the steps of the courthouse. The golden light of dawn and the flicker of evening flames merged into one unbroken glow of solidarity. Elias returned to work weeks later. The first day he walked back into St. Mary's, the staff lined the halls in silence. Nurses, janitors, surgeons, they all stood, clapping softly as he passed. At the end of the corridor, Young Tyler stood with his mother. He ran into Elias's arms, hugging him fiercely. "You saved me," the boy whispered. Elias knelt, his cane set aside. "No, Tyler. You saved me too." The city did not change overnight. Racism did not vanish with a single verdict. But something had shifted. The chants, the marches, the trial, they left a scar. Yes, but also a roadmap. People spoke differently now. Conversations once avoided were shouted in the open. Denials gave way to confessions, confessions to reforms. The system creaked, resisted, but could not ignore the weight of voices any longer. On the anniversary of the attack, thousands gathered again outside the hospital. Elias stood before them, older, still carrying the memory in his body, but stronger in spirit. The golden sun bathed the crowd, the same light that had witnessed his pain now illuminating his resilience. He lifted the microphone, his voice steady. "A year ago, I was broken on this pavement. Today, I stand because you refused to let me fall alone. Justice is not a gift, it is a demand, one we must never stop making. I am not the end of this story. I am only the beginning." The crowd roared, the chant rising once more, not just his name, but the name of every life honored through the fight. And as the sound echoed across the city, Elias closed his eyes, letting the golden light wash over him. For the first time in his life, he felt not just seen, but truly free. And the world, though imperfect, leaned a little closer toward justice. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.